There are 13 boss fights in Paper Mario the Origami King, and we are going to try to beat them all in as few turns as possible. Some of these strategies are based on luck, and some of them will work every single time. The majority of the bosses can be defeated in just 4 turns, and there are only 2 bosses that take more than 5 turns to beat. We'll go through all of the bosses in chronological order, starting with the Earth Vellumental. The first time that you fight the Earth Vellumental, it's more of a tutorial than a boss fight, but when you refight the Earth Vellumental in the Battle Lab, you can beat this boss even quicker. You can beat this boss in just 3 turns. In the first turn, we're going to walk right up to it and hit his face with a hammer. It will attack us with Earthquake. Seriously, how many Pokemon references are in this game? In the second turn, we're going to walk around to the back of the Earth Vellumental and attack its tail with our hammer. It'll jump up in pain, hide in its shell, and attack us with Rough Landing. In turn 3, all that we do is use the 1000-fold arm technique. In the first 2 turns, we've done enough damage so that in turn 3, we're able to finish off the boss with the 1000-fold arm technique. And there is the Earth Vellumental. In just 3 turns, this boss fight took 1 minute and 20 seconds in the Battle Lab. Boss number 2, Colored Pencils. This boss fight starts with the boss being able to launch some pencil missiles at us. In the first turn, what we're going to do is get behind the pencil case and slam it shut with a hammer attack. When it's the enemy's turn, the boss isn't able to open the case, so it will start firing the missiles while the case is closed, damaging itself. In the second turn, now that the pencil case is empty, 1 turn is required for the boss to reload on pencils. So what we'll do in turn 2 is pass by an A+1 panel, which lets us attack twice in 1 turn, and get to an attack panel and use 2 fire flowers, which will deal a lot of damage to the boss. When it's the enemy's turn, it'll do a weak attack against us, and we can block to take a bit less damage. Now, since we've done enough damage to the boss, it'll start charging up for its special attack. In turn 3, what we have to do is get to a 1000-fold arm magic circle, then we grab the pencils and start slamming it into the pencil case. But this isn't enough damage to finish off the boss, so the boss is going to use an attack with a funny name, Worst Case, against us, which does really low damage. And in the 4th turn, all that we have to do to finish off the boss is use a jump attack on it, and that will take care of the boss in just 4 turns. And this boss fight takes 2 minutes and 16 seconds for me. The third boss fight is the Water Vellumental, and you have to be careful with your movements during the Water Vellumental fight because it summons water spouts that wash away tiles that you won't be able to use during your turn. However, for the Water Vellumental boss fight, it seems like the panel placement is the most consistent here, that this isn't luck dependent, so you could use the same strategy every single time when facing this boss. In the first turn of this boss fight, we make a careful move to pass by the X2 panel, which lets us do double damage for this turn, and we also pass by the A+1 panel, which lets us attack twice in 1 turn. What we'll do is we will jump on the boss to get the boss to stop flying for this turn and come down, and then attack it with the hammer with our second attack in this turn, because the hammer does more damage than jumping on this boss. The boss attacks with its tail using Wyvern Whip, which doesn't do a lot of damage, then it sucks up some water and it summons more water spouts for the next turn. In the second turn, again, we set up our panel so that we pass by the X2 panel and the A+1 panel, but since the boss is already on the ground, both of our attacks will be with hammers. The boss will attack with its wing based on our placement, and it will use the Wing Ding attack. Then the boss will suck up some more water, it will start to fly again, and it will summon more water spouts for the beginning of turn 3. We're trying to beat this boss in as few turns as possible, so in turn 3, what do? We do nothing. We just let Mario fall on the first tile. Wait, what? Why don't we attack in turn 3? Isn't there something better that we can do in turn 3? Right now, this is a puzzle that still hasn't been solved, and we don't know if there is a solution to this puzzle. If we are able to set up the panels in turn 3 so that we can pass by the X2 panel and the A+1 panel and finish on an attack panel, then we would be able to finish this boss in just 4 turns. But currently, there hasn't been a solution found to this, and we don't know if there is a solution to this. So the best thing that we can do, the fastest thing that we can do in turn 3, is just do nothing in this turn. So after we do nothing in turn 3, the Water Vellumental will attack us with a Flying Bite attack, suck up some more water so that it's ready for its special attack in the next turn, and it'll summon more water spouts. So what do we do in turn 4? In turn 4, all that we'll do is bring up a heart right up to Mario so that he heals, and then he falls down, and that's the whole turn. Normally, what you'd want to do here is use the Earth Vellumental special attack here so that you could be protected from the Water Vellumental special attack, but this is a little bit faster. The Water Vellumental uses its big wave attack and it does all kinds of damage to Mario, but Mario is able to survive this attack. The Water Vellumental has to rest and recharge for a turn after using Hyper Beam, Big Wave. So now in turn 5, it's Mario's opportunity to pass by an on switch to finish on the 1000-fold arm circle and use the 1000-fold arm technique to take care of the Water Vellumental boss, finishing the boss in 5 turns. If we could find a solution to the puzzle in turn 3 where we could get A+1 and X2 and an attack panel, then this boss could be defeated in 4 turns. But as it currently stands, the fastest that this boss has been defeated was in 5 turns. The time that it took me to beat this boss was 2 minutes and 58 seconds in the Battle Lab. Boss number 4, Rubber Bands. The Rubber Band boss starts off by using the Bumper Bands attacks, where it flicks rubber bands onto the fields, replacing some of the up and down arrows with rubber bands. In the first turn, we line up the panel so that we pass by an on switch, and we finish on the 1000-fold arm circle right beside the boss in the inner ring so that we can deal the most damage. We can also line up the panel so that we pass by every single elastic band on the field, and this ends up saving a bit of time because the boss doesn't do its healing animation in between turns. The boss will attack us, and we'll just press the A button to block all the attacks that are coming to us here. In the second and third turn, we do the exact same thing. We line up the panel so that we pass by the on switch, and we finish on the 1000-fold arm magic circle, and we need this to be in either the inner ring or the second ring to do enough damage to finish this boss in 4 turns total. So after using the 1000-fold arm technique for the first 3 turns, the boss's HP bar will run out, and the boss will enter the second phase. It will use the solo snapback attack on us, and I survived this attack with just 1 HP left. So we are now on turn 4 of the fight. What Mario has to do here is line up the panels to pass by an on switch and finish on the 1000-fold arm circle right beside the boss in the inner ring. And you have to be really careful with this if your HP is low, because the boss does attack you while you're trying to grab it. Luckily, I was able to successfully grab the boss here before it attacked me and finish this boss in just 4 turns. This is one of my longest boss fights, and this one took me 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Boss fight number 5, the Fire Vellumental. The first 3 turns of this boss fight are going to be exactly the same. We're going to pass by an A+1 panel so we can attack twice in 1 turn, and then use both of our attacks to jump on the Fire Vellumental using Iron Boots. And the more damage we do to the Fire Vellumental, the more we jump on it, the more of its feathers fall out. And in between every turn, the Fire Vellumental will use the Molten Feathers attack, where it launches its own feathers onto the board. And as you pass by these feathers, you take damage. So you have to be careful, and you also need some luck so that you don't take too much damage so that you can defeat this boss in as few turns as possible. In the 4th turn, we're going to use the Water Vellumental special attack. And if we use this too soon, and then we try to use the 1000-fold arm magic circle the next turn, then the boss ends up healing all of its HP and we have to do the whole fight all over again. So right now, I haven't been able to do this successfully unless I use the Water Vellumental special in the 4th turn. Otherwise, the boss just ends up healing. So after we do this, all of the fire is put out, and we have an opportunity to use the 1000-fold arm technique on the boss. Then we damage the boss, knock out some of its feathers, then we grab it and pluck it, and that defeats the boss in 5 turns. This boss fight took me 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Boss fight number 6, Hole Punch. This boss gives some people some difficulty, but once you know this strategy, This is a pretty easy way to do it, and you can do this boss fight pretty quickly. In the first turn, we'll bring the treasure chest right up to Mario so that he opens the treasure chest and falls down. Wait, if we're trying to beat this boss quickly, why are we not attacking in the first turn? Why are we just going for a treasure chest? We'll see, don't worry. Since we're far away from the boss, when it's the enemy's turn, it will use the Getting Down attack on us, which doesn't do too much damage, and we can block that to take a bit less damage. Remember how we opened the treasure chest in the first turn? Well, that treasure chest had an A+1 panel and an X2 panel inside it, and we need that for this turn right here. So in turn 2, what we do is we pass by the A+1 panel to attack twice in one turn, the X2 panel for double damage in this turn, and we end up behind the boss and attack it with a hammer, doing lots of damage, and this is where a lot of damage to the boss comes from. The boss is going to use the Throwing Punches attack at us, which will deal some damage, and then it will start glowing because it'll be ready to use its special attack. Now that it's turn 3, what we'll do is use an Earth Vellumental Magic Circle. This will raise us up so that when the boss attacks us, it doesn't deal any damage to us, and the boss flips upside down, exposing a vulnerable part of it so that we can deal lots of damage in the next turn. In turn 4, what we do is we pass by the on switch, and we finish on the 1000-fold arm circle, and since the boss is flipped upside down, it's vulnerable to this, we can do all kinds of damage with this, and if we deal enough damage, we can tear off the bottom part of the boss, and that defeats the boss in just 4 turns. And this boss fight took me 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Boss number 7 is the Ice Vellumental, and this is both the longest fight in the game and the boss fight that takes the most turns. There are currently speedrunners working on this boss, seeing if there's a way to make this boss faster, seeing if there's a way to skip the ice maze. So if you're interested in developments on this, you can check out the Paper Mario the Origami King speedrunning Discord. I'll have that linked in the video description. What we'll do in the first turn is pass by a treasure chest and finish on an attack panel and use a fire flower, which will deal very little damage to the boss because it's encased in ice. Some people in the first turn also choose to just get the treasure chest. In turn number 2, we'll now be able to use the Fire Vellumental special attack. And this is a big part of what makes this such a long fight. The boss repeatedly encases itself in ice, and whenever the boss is encased in ice, no matter what we do, everything does very little damage. So we need to use the Fire Vellumental special attack, and then we can do something else to start damaging the boss. So this is why this boss fight takes so long. In the third fight, once the boss has thawed, what we'll do is use the 1000-fold arm technique, and we can repeatedly hit the boss. This does a lot of damage to the boss, and it makes the boss dizzy, so in the next turn we have another opportunity to attack it without it attacking us. What we'll do in turn number 4 is bring an attack panel directly in front of Mario so that it's the first tile that he steps on, and we'll use a shiny fire flower. And if we get every action command, then each of those attacks will do 9 damage for a total of 36 damage. After this, the boss will encase itself in an ice shield again, so when it's turn 5, we have to again use the Fire Vellumental special attack to thaw it so that we can start damaging it some more the next turn. When we get to the 6th turn, what we'll do again is use the 1000-fold arm technique to do some damage to the boss. Now normally the boss should be dizzy after using the 1000-fold arm technique, but since the boss's HP is so low here, it will initiate the ice maze attack, and we'll have to solve the ice maze to defeat the boss. If the boss's HP is low enough when you start turn 7, you can just bring an attack panel right up to Mario and finish it off with a fire flower or a shiny fire flower, or you could just solve the ice maze. Either way, the boss fight takes 7 turns, and this is a very long fight compared to all of the other bosses in this game. This is the longest boss fight in the game in terms of total turns by far. This boss fight took me 4 minutes and 47 seconds, and if you take a look at the world records for individual levels for Paper Mario the Origami King, this boss is very clearly the longest boss fight in the game. Boss number 8 is Tape. And the funny thing is, we just had the longest boss fight in the game. Now we're going to have the second longest boss fight in the game. So this boss has 2 phases, and the first phase is very, very easy to take care of. All that we'll do in the first turn is we will bring an attack panel right to the front of the boss, and we'll get there and we will attack with a fire flower. If you attack with a fire flower, that takes out 2 corners of the case immediately. There are 4 corners of this boss that we have to take care of in the first phase. In the second turn, what we'll do, we'll line up the attack panel to be behind the boss, and we'll use a fire flower. And that defeats the first phase of this boss in 2 turns, and that's the fastest way that we could get through phase 1 of this boss fight. Now, we'll be starting phase 2 of this boss fight, and this will be the 3rd turn of the fight. And this is where things start to get difficult, because the way that the tape is placed and the way that your panels are placed, sometimes you could have movements that are just impossible to do, and I think that this is the most frustrating boss of the entire game. One strategy that seems to work is using the Fire Vellumental to clear the tape off the board, even though in the next turn the tape boss is going to put more tape onto the board with its rollout attack, and then after that, using the 1000-fold arm technique as often as you can. So as an example, in turn 3, we'll use the Fire Vellumental Magic Circle, then in turn 4, we'll use the 1000-fold arm magic technique, and that will do a lot of damage to the boss. In turn 5, the most useful panels to us that can do the most damage to the boss won't be available to us. So what we'll have to do at this point is bring up the chest to Mario so that he could open that and get these panels unlocked for the next turn. And then in turn 6 of the boss fight, which is hopefully the final turn of the boss fight if we're doing this quickly and we got lucky with our panel placement, we'll use the 1000-fold arm technique to finish off the boss. So this is the 2nd longest boss fight in the game, taking 6 turns. Boss fight number 9 is the boss Sumo Bros, and at first, this boss fight can seem pretty tricky. There are lots of enemies that you have to defeat. It may seem like this boss fight will take a very long time, but surprisingly, you can actually beat this boss fight in just 4 turns also. In the first turn, what you'll have to do is use the legendary Iron Boots to attack the Sumo Bro that took the on panel. You have to get at least 3 jumps on it with legendary Iron Boots to defeat it, and then the on panel becomes available to you to use in the second turn. In the second turn, now that you have the on panel available, what you'll do is pass by the on panel and finish on the Earth Vellumental Magic Circle. Then you'll activate that, and that will damage all of the Sumo Bros on the ground, taking care of all of them. When the Sumo Bros still on the clouds will come over to attack you, they won't be able to damage you, but the funny thing is, you can still press A to try to guard, even though it does nothing because you don't get hurt. Since all of the Sumo Bros on the ground have been defeated, the Sumo Bros in the clouds will now jump down to the ground, and the 2 little Sumo Bros will also take some more of the panels. So what you'll want to do is jump on the Sumo Bro that has the Fire Vellumental Magic Circle with your legendary Iron Boots, and again you have to get at least 3 jumps onto it to defeat it. After this, the Fire Vellumental Magic Circle will be available in turn 4. So in turn 4, what you'll do, pass by the on switch and finish on the Fire Vellumental Magic Circle, because the Sumo Bros boss has a weakness to fire. So the Fire Vellumental Magic Circle, using its special ability, you can take out the rest of the enemies in this single turn, taking out all of the boss's HP in just this 1 turn, and that is how to defeat this boss in 4 turns. This boss fight took me about 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Boss fight number 10 is the Handaconda. What we'll do in the first turn is pass by an X2 panel for double damage, and we'll finish on an attack panel that's not in the inner ring, but 1 ring away from the inner ring, so that we can hammer the boss. In the second turn, we'll do the same thing, but we don't have to pass the X2 panel, and after we do this, Olivia will pop out, so after that we'll be able to use the Vellumental circles again now that Olivia is saved. In turn 3 and 4, in order to beat this boss in 4 turns, it's completely based on luck. All that you have to do is get lucky with your rock, paper, scissors selection twice in a row. What I did in this fight, I chose scissors twice in a row, and luckily that defeated the boss, and here's how to defeat the boss in 4 turns. This took me 1 minute and 53 seconds. Sometimes this took more than 4 turns, sometimes when I used scissors both times it didn't work, but in this video that I'm showing here, when I used scissors both times, it ended up working, and we defeated the boss in 4 turns. Boss fight number 11 is scissors, and there are several ways to do this. There are several very good ways to do this, but what I'll be showing is the quickest way to do this, since Right now, I haven't seen a way to do this boss in less than 5 turns, and there are several ways to do this boss in 5 turns, so here's the fastest way to do this boss in 5 turns. In the first turn, we'll pass by the chest and then jump on the boss with legendary boots 3 times. So we only hit the first 2 action commands, so we get 3 jumps and then fall off. In the second turn, we'll pass by an X2 panel for double damage and use a legendary hammer on the boss, but only getting a nice action command, so pressing A almost right away. In the third turn, all that we need is the chest. We don't need to attack, we don't need to do anything else, so we just bring the chest right up to Mario, so he opens it and then he falls down, and that's it for the turn. In turn 4, we'll pass by the A+1 panel to attack twice in this turn, the X2 panel to do double damage in this turn, and we'll finish on an attack panel. So in this turn, this is where we will do a lot of damage. What we'll do in this turn is try to jump on the handle of the boss with legendary iron boots twice. So you'll notice that the boss bounces a few times, then flips upside down, then bounces a few more times and flips upside down again. So we want to make sure that when we confirm our attack, we're confirming our attack when the handles are facing up so that we jump on the handles. In turn 5, the boss is now going to be ready to use its special attack. What you normally do when the boss is ready to use its special attack is you use the Ice Vellumental, you freeze it, then after that you use the 1000-fold arm technique, and then you can damage the boss. But since we've done everything perfectly in these 4 turns using this very quick method, what we'll do in the 5th turn is use a shiny hurl hammer, bringing the attack panel right up to Mario so that it's the first tile that he gets to, and if we get a perfect action command, that does just enough damage to defeat the boss in turn 5. And using this, I was able to defeat the boss in 2 minutes and 11 seconds. Boss fight number 12 is the Stapler, and this is normally a very long fight. This fight has 3 phases where the staples change colors. People struggle with this, and this is one of my most popular boss guide videos on YouTube for Paper Mario: The Origami King. But once you know how to do this, you can beat this boss in 4 turns pretty easily. In the first turn, we'll pass by an A+1 panel so that we can attack twice, and when we get to an attack panel, we'll use 2 shiny fire flowers, getting all the action commands. In the second turn, we'll line up the panels so that we pass by a chest, and we finish on an attack panel using another shiny fire flower and getting all the action commands. In the third turn, the boss will now be ready to use its special attack. It'll start glowing. So what we'll do in this turn is pass by the on switch and finish on the 1000-fold arm circle and use the 1000-fold arm technique on it. Normally, you want to jump a lot on this boss instead of using a hammer so that you could knock out as many staples from it as you can, so you don't take too much damage when the boss uses its special attack on you. But if your HP is high, then you could use this method to defeat this boss very quickly in 4 turns. So what we'll do in the 4th turn, after the boss uses its special attack, it'll open up and it's ready to reload in staples. But this is a moment when it's vulnerable, so what we'll do to defeat the boss here is we'll pass by an A+1 panel and an X2 panel, and when we get to the attack panel, what we'll do is we will jump on this boss. We'll use 2 legendary iron boot attacks, and if we get all the action commands, that will be just enough damage to defeat this boss in only 4 turns, skipping the red staples part of the fight and the gold staples part of the fight, and making this a very quick fight, which only took me 2 minutes and 28 seconds. Boss fight number 13. This is the final boss fight of the game. It's not listed in the Battle Lab. You have to actually go to the boss to defeat this boss. It is King Olly. King Olly will transform into the different Vellumentals, and depending on which Vellumental he transforms into, you will have to use that Vellumental's weakness to defeat it. Some of the Vellumentals are easier to defeat than others, and with some of the Vellumentals, you can even defeat the boss, King Olly, without taking any damage at all. In this particular fight, what happened was King Olly first transformed into the Fire Vellumental. So what we did, we went over to the Vellumental Circle and transformed into the Water Vellumental using its special attack to put out the fire. And in the second turn, we used the 1000-fold arm technique to deal a lot of damage to the boss. Now, in this particular fight that I did here, I did end up walking past some of the fire feathers, taking some damage, but if you're lucky or if you plan your panels nicely, then you actually can get past the Fire Vellumental without taking any damage, as you can see in this clip here. Since we did our turns quickly and we dealt enough damage, King Olly after this transformed into the Earth Vellumental, which is a very easy Vellumental to not take any damage from. All that you do when King Olly transforms into the Earth Vellumental is get to the Vellumental Circle after activating it and use the Ice Vellumental's power. After this would have been your third turn. It will now be the fourth turn. What we'll do is just pass by the on switch, use the 1000-fold arm technique, and that will defeat this phase of the boss. This phase of the boss is defeated in 4 turns, and after this you don't have any more ring combat moves. Again, in phase 2 of the fight, it's just slamming the ground with the 1000-fold arm magic circle, and phase 4 is basically just a ring scramble. So there we have it. Most bosses in this game can be defeated in 4 to 5 turns, and the majority of bosses can be defeated in 4 turns or less. There's one boss, the Ice Vellumental. The longest boss in the game takes 7 turns. Tape takes 6 turns. Maybe one day we'll see that brought down to 5 turns. So for some of these bosses, it may have been pretty difficult to beat them the first time and to find out what their weaknesses are, what affects these bosses. How can we defeat these bosses? How can we stop these bosses from healing themselves to full HP if we're trying to defeat them? But once you know these strategies, hopefully this helps out. Hopefully this makes this easier. And you could see how quickly you could beat some of these bosses. With the majority of bosses, you could beat in 4 turns or less. If you're looking for a more in-depth guide on how to defeat any of these particular bosses, I have guides for this on my YouTube channel. If you're interested in Paper Mario the Origami King, Paper Mario, or gaming content in general, I really suggest that you subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you could be notified when new videos come out. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a lovely day, and take care.